There are various ways the three Baltic nations collaborate and coordinate on regional defense and security. Perhaps there isn't as much joint procurement as people would want, but it does happen from time to time with ammunition, and quite notably the purchase of HIMARS rocket artillery from the United States. Large-scale exercises may also include multiple Baltic nations alongside NATO allies deployed to the region. But one historical form of cooperation was BALTBAT, the Baltic Battalion. As the title of this unit suggests, it was a battalion of soldiers from the three Baltic nations, Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia. For today's video, let's go deeper into the history and role of BALTBAT and maybe ask ourselves if it should be revived. And so, according to the Baltic Defence College, BALTBAT officially started in September 1994 when the governments of Estonia, Latvia and Lithuania concluded a tri-national agreement on the establishment of a joint peacekeeping unit. VLE.LT notes that Denmark, Finland, Norway and Great Britain signed a memorandum on cooperation in the creation of BALTBAT, while material support was provided by the United States, the UK, Germany and other nations. So why was it formed in the first place, and why were other nations involved? Well, historical context is pretty important here. Sure, the Baltic nations declared their independence from the Soviet Union in 1990 and 1991, but Russia didn't fully withdraw its military presence for quite some time. In fact, for Lithuania, Russian forces only fully departed by the end of August 1993. And so in these early post-Soviet years, with the absence of an occupying force, it was time for all three Baltic nations to build militaries of their own. The Baltic Defence College highlights that the armed forces in the three states were at the initial stage of creation. It notes that the process was actually led by two groups: volunteers, who had little expertise to offer but had plenty of goodwill and determination, and former Soviet army officers who decided to support the establishment of armed forces in their newly independent countries. Set up as a peacekeeping unit, BALTBAT was a way for supporting Western nations to develop the capabilities of the Baltic militaries without upsetting Russia. It was also a way for the Baltic nations to develop closer ties to the West and NATO in the lead-up to joining the military alliance. The Baltic Defence College paper we're drawing much of our info from had this to say: "The battalion has become a symbolic expression of the determination of the Baltic states to anchor their security in the democratic Europe." Yes, peacekeeping was the publicly stated goal, but the underlying effect would be closer relations to Western nations, with Baltic military leaders getting Western military training. All of this, done under the banner of peacekeeping, would ensure that nothing was provocative. Practically speaking, VLE.LT says that BALTBAT consisted of 800 soldiers. This saw one infantry company from each of the Baltic nations, as well as a joint headquarters company and a separate logistics group. The headquarters and the main training center were in Ardasi, Latvia, while the Lithuanian BALTBAT training center was in Rukla. BALTBAT's leadership was appointed on a rotating basis and their official working language was English. In the late 1990s, an infantry company of BALTBAT participated in the SFOR mission in Bosnia and Herzegovina. BALTBAT sounded great, but in practice it had its issues. It was small, yet gobbled up valuable resources. The training for peacekeeping operations was considered irrelevant to the training that was actually needed for the geopolitical situation of the three countries. The whole project was seen as more of a political initiative. Again, as mentioned earlier, it was meant to develop closer ties to the West and assert Baltic unity and cooperation. In one advanced stage of training Baltic officers, a paper by the Copenhagen Peace Research Institute details that 4 Nordic states agreed on a division of labor. The Danish area of responsibility was to promote training of the reconnaissance and signal platoons. Norway trained the headquarters platoon and medical unit, and Sweden provided training of the maintenance, supply and engineer platoons. Finally, Finland trained the food services and transportation platoons. But after a short 6 or so years, things would dissolve, although from documents it appears the original Baltic Battalion concept was always meant to be a temporary initiative. In 2001, the Baltic states launched separate projects with pairings with various Scandinavian countries. Lithuania and Denmark had LitBat, Latvia and Sweden had LatBat, and Estonia and Finland had EstBat. And then there was another twist, as in 2012 the Lithuanian, Latvian and Estonian defense ministers agreed to restore the BALTBAT project. A memorandum was signed on the formation of a battalion in 2014.
Lithuania, Latvia and Estonia have confirmed plans to send a joint battalion of 1,000 troops to join NATO's Rapid Response Force. The announcement was made following a meeting between Baltic defence chiefs in Latvia. The revised NATO defence strategy is aimed at protecting the three Baltic states and Poland, who all share borders with Russia, from Kremlin aggression.
For this newly reformed BALTBAT, training started in 2015 for the unit to be a standby NATO response force, or NRF. An article from ArmyRecognition.com notes that this version of BALTBAT had two Estonian combat companies, one company from Lithuania and one from Latvia. The anti-tank platoons were from Lithuania and Estonia, and there was a Lithuanian mortar platoon and one support element. Leadership would come from all three countries, and in total, BALTBAT would be about 700 soldiers.
And Baltic Battalion is a three Baltic states cooperation project for the NRF. The lead nation is Estonia, providing a Scouts Battalion with a HQ and most of the subunits, and Latvia and Lithuania will both add one infantry company and a couple of smaller combat support and combat service support elements.
This revival of BALTBAT would again be short-lived. In 2020, the commanders of the land forces of Lithuania, Latvia and Estonia signed an agreement to suspend the project as of 2021. The countries instead agreed to focus mainly on cooperation in the areas of intelligence, fire support, the protection of forces and non-kinetic operations. Specific points of cooperation for 2021 included participation in international exercises, qualification courses, seminars, military competitions, headquarter conversations and other events. So there you have it, an overview of the history of the Baltic Battalion, why it was formed, its compositions, some of its activities, and its eventual dissolution. The idea of BALTBAT is pretty cool, just from an international and regional cooperation perspective. The Baltic nations share so much history together, especially a recent history of shared struggle for independence from an occupier. Indeed, of all the international relationships out there, the political closeness between Lithuania, Latvia and Estonia stands out. These days, it looks like NATO and its enhanced forward presence units have somewhat taken over the role of international military cooperation, with multinational battle groups stationed in each of the three Baltic nations. But due to the structure and involvement from various other NATO countries, the forces of Lithuania, Latvia and Estonia don't interact with each other as much. Definitely not as much as if a Baltic battalion were still around. Although the Baltic Battalion is long gone, there are military units out there which share the same spirit of international cooperation as BALTBAT. Two notable examples are in Western Europe, with Germany being the common thread. The first example is the 1 Corps in Münster, North Rhine-Westphalia, also known as the German/Netherlands Corps. According to the Bundeswehr's website, it has the function of either a classic corps headquarters or a headquarters for a special response force. It can also serve as a land component command headquarters in which respective operations are conducted either under the command and control of the two framework nations, Germany and the Netherlands, or of NATO or the EU. This Dutch-German command unit has two binational units, a signal battalion and a headquarters and support battalion, directly subordinate to it. The Corps has a rotational command structure where leadership alternates between German and Dutch officers. Then moving south, there's the Franco-German Brigade. Created in October 1989 by the two nations, this unit came to be after dialogue between French and German leaders 2 years prior. According to a NATO webpage, it's a binational infantry brigade that is similar to the national brigades of these countries, but with the special feature of being binational and also with a broader range of operational capabilities. The 2022 fact sheet says that the Franco-German Brigade consisted of 5,600 soldiers, with 60% German and 40% French. Units that make up the brigade are headquartered on both sides of the Rhine River, in Mulheim in Baden-Württemberg, along with 6 regiments and battalions and an independent company. As a permanent bilateral interoperable structure, the brigade enables France and Germany to train together in order to be ready to intervene and participate in side-by-side operations. This deep dive video by DW discussing Europe's rearmament gives us some interesting insight into the Franco-German Brigade, how it benefits soldiers from the two nations in learning from one another, as well as highlighting the challenges of integrating forces from two countries.
Sometimes we start with English if we encounter a German soldier, and then we see how it feels and work out whether the person speaks French or German. It's really a mix. In France, we work in clear groups. We're really all in it together. We've noticed the Germans are able to be a bit more detached or work in pairs, so they communicate a bit more in their commands.
But this kind of fully integrated unit isn't the norm. Though European militaries are constantly working to become more interoperational, it's complicated. Sending arms, not to mention armies, across European borders can involve weeks of bureaucracy. Plus, many countries have their own types of tank, air defence system or battleship. These German soldiers use German G-36 assault rifles, while the French troops are kitted out with France's FAMAS model. In future, they'll all use one new type of gun, but for now, they have to train on both.
It's this clip which further highlights the challenges of multinational projects like BALTBAT. It's a great idea on paper, but perhaps difficult to execute due to bureaucracy and logistics. But of course, we have to end off by asking what you think about the multinational military unit that was BALTBAT. Is it something that could or should be revived in the future? Let us know by leaving a comment.